Stay tuned until the end for the life or death question. Time to be one with nature. This world is a strange one. Good evening, Night Watchers. Tonight, I have for you a set of stories I have no idea why I haven't narrated yet. I mean, what horror narrator in their right mind doesn't make a video right away on camping? Camping is one of the creepiest activities a person can entertain themselves with. Going into the woods, staying overnight in true darkness, sharing the same environment with the unknown creatures around you. It's a gamble with your life. There are things in those woods, as I'm sure many of you know by now, and those things are watching whether we believe these stories or not. We are never alone. Here are 5 true camping scary stories. Stoke the fire and stay near the light. Number 1. Creature on a camping trip. Submitted by Doss P. After sharing my story about the lake creature, I have decided to share my other paranormal experience that had happened in late spring of 2015. I was on a hiking trip with my brother, and by this time the whole lake creature thing was behind me, and it was only a distant memory. So me and my brother were planning to hike to a mountain where there would be little to no animals, and the weather there was pretty calm. Anyway, my brother and I planned to arrive at the mountain on the first day and then camp there for about 2 days. It was a 10-mile hike, but we were prepared for it since me and my brother loved the outdoors. Once we were a mile or so away from the mountain, we noticed this horrible smell in the air, like a raccoon or deer had died. The smell went away after a few moments when we continued on our hike towards the mountain. It was already late evening, so once we arrived at the base of the mountain, we set up camp. We started a fire and explored the area around our campsite to keep ourselves occupied. Even though it was nighttime, we had some really good flashlights we were able to see a couple of silver-haired bats and a white-tailed deer with. Once we got back, we just started talking while sitting around the fire. During a brief, quiet moment, while neither of us were talking, I heard the crunching of leaves. Thinking there might be some deer or raccoons trying to get into our trash, I quickly shone my flashlight in the direction I had heard the crunch, but I saw nothing. I brushed it off, thinking I might have just heard a pine cone fall from a tree. It was close to 12 in the morning once we decided to head into our tents. Me and my brother both had our individual tents. Anyway, I usually had a hard time falling asleep on camping trips, so it usually takes me a long time to fall asleep. Right when I was about to fall asleep, I heard the crunch again, but this time, it was closer. Then it hit me. The crunches that I was hearing had the same rhythm as someone walking. At first I had thought it was my brother going to take a piss, but I listened and I heard him snoring in his own tent. Not trying to make any noise in my sleeping bag, I continued to hear the steps get louder and more close to our camping site. Then, right when the steps got right outside of my tent, they stopped. I quickly got my folding knife ready, praying the thing wouldn't intrude inside my tent. Once I heard the first sound of my zipper moving, I lunged forward at the thing. I don't know if I hit it or not, and I didn't exactly see what the thing looked like, but a few seconds after, it let out this horrible noise that sounded like a cross between a scream and a howl. It woke my brother up, and before my brother made it out of his tent, it was gone. There was nothing outside. "The hell was that, man?" my brother said. "It tried to get into my tent. Dude, we have to leave now," I responded. Then I remembered. It was a couple-hour hike from where we set up camp. "We need to run. We need to get the hell out of here," I said to my brother. Something almost got into my tent. Something that could use the zipper, and I was not about to stay there overnight. The only things we left with were our flashlights and wallets. We didn't bother to pick up our stuff, but once we were already heading down the way we came, we had forgot to get protection. Our knives. Easily remembered and easily forgot. "We can't go back, that thing is over there," I said. "And we need protection," my brother responded. So he went back to the campsite while I waited on the trail. A few moments went by and I was getting worried, so I went back to camp to get him. I was 100 feet away from our campsite when I saw a figure going through my tent. Immediately, I assumed it was my brother getting some extra stuff, and I was about to call out to him when I was pulled aside into a bush and my mouth was covered by a hand. It was my brother. His face was completely pale. "We need to get the hell out of here," my brother said in a whisper. The 10-mile trek back to camp would have taken us at least 2 hours. I'd say we ran it in about 30 minutes, and during that time, we kept on hearing that howl a couple 100 feet behind us. Once we got back to the car, my brother floored it, and we were home in no time flat. My brother and I never talk about that camping trip, and we never went camping after that. It always puts me into a mood whenever I think what could have happened if I was still asleep when the thing tried to get into my tent. Number 2. Night Guard at the Scout Camp. Submitted by Shaylin Aw. I have been a scout since I was very little, and I really enjoyed our summer camps, but this year was different. I was finally old enough to join the Night Guard rota. I was 11 or 12. I do not remember exactly, but I knew I was ready. The task was simple. The member of your rota will come to wake you up when it was your time to switch off, and you would guard the camp for 1.5 hours. Then you will wake up another member who will switch off with you. It's 2 a.m. and my friend wakes me up for my shift. I was super excited. I was alone, sitting in the middle of the camp. The night was calm and the sky was clear. Beautiful stars were sparkling above my head, and a light summer breeze was playing with my hair. The time was passing fast. I was sitting very close to the fire so I could catch some light for reading my old comic. Right when I turned a page, I heard some rustling noise. I looked up immediately, but I saw nothing. I thought maybe some leaves fell, so I didn't pay much attention. I returned back to reading, but then I could hear some weird growling very clear. My heartbeat picked up. I could hear it in my head. The growling was coming from the camp. I took my flashlight and went to check it out, even though I would rather stay by the safety of the fire. I was getting very close to it. Step by step, the growling was getting louder. A weird thing was that it was not moving. It was coming from our leader's tent. It was only our leader snoring. I felt so silly for being so paranoid. I got back to the fire and I sat down. I had only 20 more minutes left. Everything was going smooth. I had a really ominous feeling. The weird noise and the growling, or snoring, it got me in a mood. I had a feeling like someone was watching me, or maybe something. I could feel the pointy eyes on my back, but when I tried to stare in the distance, I saw only darkness. But then, very strong wind came up and blew my comic right to the direction where I thought the watcher would be. I did not want to go to get it. It was only 5 meters away, but the wind blew even harder, and I couldn't see my comic anymore. There was simply no way I could get up and get it. I heard a few steps more to the right. What if there was someone, or a boar, or maybe just a fox or something? I was so scared. I decided to cheat, and I moved the time on the watch I was sharing with my rota, and went to wake up another member. I went to sleep, or at least tried to. The growling, the snoring became so loud. But this growling was different than what it was before. The main thing was it was moving, and it was very close to my tent. I could hear it. I could even feel it a few steps away. But a few moments after that, it was gone. Silence. In the morning, when I woke up, I found the comic next to my tent, and it was missing a few pages. It looked like it had been chewed. I didn't tell anyone about this experience. It has been more than 10 years ago, but it feels like yesterday. Number 3. Sasquatch stalking my campsite. Submitted by Baller15. In May 2015, I was 14 years old. It was Memorial Day weekend, so I was invited to go camping with my friends, Will, Matt, and Jake. I'm from St. Louis, so I rarely go hiking, and it was my second time sleeping in a tent outdoors. On Saturday, we went ATV riding on the trail paths, did some airsoft, and did a little fishing. It was around 11 at night when we finished our campfire that we decided to go to bed. We had 2 tents, one for Will, Jake, and Jake's father, and one for me and Matt. I woke up around 3:30 in the morning to hear rustling, heavy walking, and stuff from the campsite getting knocked around. I thought maybe someone was up and tired. Well, I thought they were tired, because they probably wouldn't knock stuff around if they were wide awake. The next thing that happened took a huge turn, and it scared the hell out of me. I zipped open the tent window, and to my surprise, it was none of my friends. What I saw was a humanoid figure, 8 to 9 feet tall, hairy, and had wide shoulders. I sat there scared to death, looking at this thing in shock. Matt woke up and asked me what I was doing. I said quietly, "Look over there. What is that?" He was equally freaked out. He replied, "I don't know, man." All of a sudden, it walked over to the other tent and started shaking and pressing on it. I was terrified for my friends. Jake's dad woke up and said, "Whoever that is, stop now." After about 10 seconds, the thing stepped back, 5 huge steps into the tree line. Jake's dad went outside with his gun and flashlight. He shined his light into the tree line. The light reflected 2 glowing eyes almost 9 feet off the ground. He started cursing at it to go away, but all it did was make weird grunting noises. It started to move closer, but Jake's dad fired 2 rounds into the trees to fend it off. To our luck, it walked away. The other 2 woke up to the gunshots and asked what had happened. We told them, and they were freaked out, but not half as much as we were. When we saw the first sign of sunlight, we packed up and got the hell out of there, never returning to that area again. We told everyone back at school and home, but they didn't believe us. But 3 people experiencing it was better than 1 or even 2. I still get a little scared every now and then, especially when I go in the woods. I try not to think about what would happen if I went outside instead of zipping up that open window, and also if Jake's dad didn't have a gun with him. To this day, I haven't experienced anything else half as strange. Number 4. Witches. Submitted by Pearl. I was 14 at the time, and I like to think of myself as a witch. Before I start, I have several experiences with other witches. My grandmother on my mom's side, I'm sure, was a witch, and that may be where I got these odd powers of sorts from. My grandmother died when I was 3, so I don't remember much of her, but I remember 2 moments with her. The first one is random and nothing very paranormal, but the second one, I was playing about in my granddad's back garden, and we lived with my granddad at the time. I fell and cut my leg on some rocks sitting around, and my grandmother rushed over. I remember exactly, very clearly, that I was bleeding a lot. There was blood on my tights, my shirt, my hands. Some was even on my face because I had rubbed my eyes. My grandmother knelt down next to me, rubbed her hands together, and I swear to God I saw sparks or something. They came from her hands. She put her hands over the cut, and I'm being completely serious. The cut healed and turned into a small, greenish bruise. The blood was still in my hands, but there was no trace of a cut on my leg. My mom rushed over, and I think she looked slightly angry at my grandmother when she took me inside to clean me up. I can only imagine she didn't want my grandmother exposing me to that kind of stuff. Since then, I've seen a swamp witch at a local duck and bird preserve near where I live. She looked disgusting, and when she saw me, she smiled a bit. Her teeth were solid black, and she was terrifying. I ran away screaming for my mother when she said, Dia duit lianba, which is Irish for hello child. I don't understand that much Irish, but for some reason, I knew what she was saying. I know that dia duit is hello, but at the time I didn't know Irish until I started learning it by myself. While learning it, I remembered that experience, but back to the story. I ran to my mother, and when I looked back, that creepy witch with the black teeth, she was gone. My mom started pushing us along the path faster, and we left without going to the gift shop that day. But I knew it was a witch. I could feel it. Her eyes were the scariest part, though. They were bloodshot, and I couldn't see anything but a pupil on them. I found out I had the same kind of magic, almost, as my grandmother. When I rubbed my hands together, when it was cold and the room would slowly heat up. I was quite shocked at first. My mom walked in and commented on how the rest of the house was freezing, but my room was warm, which made me realize that she hadn't turned up the thermostat. Then one time while I was camping, I was going through part of a small forest near the camp with my brother and a friend. We reached a tree that had 4 names on it, and one name was scratched out. I remember that name the most. Naomi. I saw a knife nearby, and I put my hand on the tree over the name that was crossed out, and my hand instantly started feeling like it was burning, and the name was glowing bright white. My friend didn't see it, but my brother looked at me and had a slightly confused look on his face. I headed back to the camp after that, with a few burn marks on my hand. That night was a new moon. I find around new moons I'm weaker and I feel sick, and I can't really control my powers, so to say. On full moons, I feel stronger. Yeah, I know it sounds a bit unbelievable, but hear me out. It was a new moon, of course, that night, and I stayed up later, staring at the side of the tent. My hand started hurting, so I looked at it, and a small spark was flickering near it, and when I looked, it disappeared. Some of my friends believed me when I told them that I thought I was a witch, as a few of them say that about once a month, probably on a new moon, they'd see small sparks or lights escaping from my hands. Most of my friends don't believe me and just laugh. It makes me upset, as I am not lying about any of it. Yesterday, the 4th of July as well, was a new moon, and sparks were coming from my hands again. I'll stop here for now, as this account is pretty long so far. If anyone else has these kinds of things happening, do you know how to stop it? Number 5. I'm never living in isolation again. Submitted by Treble Hook. This happened to me a couple of years back when we first moved to Ohio. You probably know Ohio for its major cities like Cleveland and Cincinnati, but outside of town there's nothing but trees and, well, more trees. We moved from an apartment complex to an old cabin because my mom wanted to get out of town. I know it sounds stereotypical to move to a creepy cabin, but it's true. You're probably wondering then, why would we move to such a creepy place? Well, my mom wanted to be able to sit out on the front porch and sip coffee in peace. Well, I always wanted to go out and make things, discover things, and just have fun. But on the inside, I did have a fear of something out there. My sister, who is a couple of years older than me, wanted to hang out with her friends. She hated going outside and actually doing things, which is unfortunate because I wanted someone to play with. Luckily for me, though, I had my black dog, Fluffy. She's a black lab with a touch of white on her chest, and she was really soft as a puppy, so that's how she got her name. She'd often run off, but she would always come back later. So I stopped worrying about her eventually. My dad moved with his side of the family who lived somewhere west. I honestly forgot where exactly. It's been so long. So it's just me, my mom, and my sister, alone. Now that I get that out of the way, this is my encounter with a creature that still has gone unexplained. My sister and I were camping outside of the cabin. For some reason, she is always cooking marshmallows over the stove in the house. It's a good idea. They're tasty, but it's odd. Since she likes marshmallows and I'm basically a pyromaniac, we decided to camp outside, right where our yard meets the trees, and start a fire. After we had our fair share of marshmallows and hot dogs, I slept inside my sister's car because we didn't have a tent. She just went inside the house to sleep. I woke up to the sound of bushes crackling and rustling. I don't know what time it was because I didn't have anything to check, but the lights in the house were out except for the porch lights, so everyone must have been asleep. I sat up from the passenger seat and tried to focus my eyes in the darkness outside. The bush that was moving was right by the passenger door, which was where I was sleeping. After listening and looking out the window for a solid 10 minutes, I decided that I was going to try to get back to sleep. But I started to hype myself up. I rounded up the courage to hop out of the car and run for it. I made it to the back porch and turned and looked to see if I was being followed. But I still couldn't see everything very well, it was so dark. All I could see was the red-hot coals of the fire we made. Then I turned to open the door, but I heard something running towards me. It almost sounded like hooves, but not 4, just 2. And they weren't very consistent. I looked back and saw a tall thing almost limping very quickly towards me. It had long hair that was bouncing behind it, but it looked clumped together and very matted in the silhouette. I twisted the door handle, but it was locked, of course. Running around the side of the house, I was thinking, why would she lock the door when she knew I was outside? What if I got hungry or thirsty? But I quickly lost that thought when I remembered what was happening. I reached the front door and got the spare key. Then I unlocked it and ran inside, throwing the door shut behind me and locking it. I heard the now slow footsteps of the thing walking outside the window. Peeking through the blinds, I was able to get a good look at it in the porch light. And it had very thin legs with hooves. It definitely wasn't human, but I couldn't see its face, and I'm glad I couldn't. I thought for a couple of minutes, then I remembered that my mom had her cell phone and I could call 911. I ran upstairs to my mom's room, but she wasn't there. Before I could even worry, something was pounding on the front door. I hid in my room for 10 minutes, wondering all the while, what do I do? Then I heard my mother calling me from downstairs. She was very angry. Apparently the pounding on the door was my mom, and she said she couldn't find the spare key. That's because I took it inside with me. She went to the nearest gas station to get some medicine for my sister because she felt sick. My sister had to crawl through the window to unlock the door for my mom. The creature itself was nowhere to be found. Only muddy hoofprints were left behind. I remember those footprints, which was enough proof to my mom that something really did happen, that my experience, though wild, was true. Sometimes my mom isn't very convinced, and other times I think she's in denial. But when something happens to her, I know we'll be living in those apartments again pretty soon. So, the fire is going strong, and the tent protects you from the critters and insects just outside. You think you're safe, yet nothing but a zipper protects you from the evils that are out there. A killer has human hands and can enter at his own leisure. A starving, ravenous creature doesn't even need an entrance. You'll be dead before you ever see those claws ripping through the nylon. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thanks. Now, time for the life or death question. What is your favorite outdoor activity? Swimming down by the lake? Or maybe going on a quick hike? As for me, I greatly enjoy long walks on the beach. After all, there's no better way to get to the dead bodies I buried, because I buried them on the beach, so it's the only way to get to the dead bodies.